Now will we see the magic?
All right, where's Murray? Okay, who is it?
This is Jesus, kid.
Know then that it is the year 10,191.
Yes, we are bored. We're all bored now.
Hi, good night.
Good night.
Hello, and welcome to episode 39 of Mary vs. the Movies with your host, Mary Jones.
And Dennis Lang.
And it is the last episode of our Christmas month. I know, right? It flew by. So this week we are watching Fanny and Alexander, which is an Ingmar Bergman film?
Written by J.D. Salinger?
No, that's Franny and Zoe. Have you even read Franny and Zoe?
No.
That's fine.
I know the cover.
Yeah, because all the covers are the same.
Yeah.
At least with the paperbacks I have. Anyway, no, this is an Ingmar Bergman film. So when I say Ingmar Bergman, I guess what you ought to think of is the chess match against death.
Mm-hmm.
That's him. That's his movies, right? Swedish. I don't know. Did Sweden have a new wave? I guess it's. Did they even have an old wave? I have no idea what Swedish film was.
It's a general wave.
So, yeah, very influential Swedish director of the 20th century, and I think this is like maybe one of his last projects. I think. I don't know if that's true. Of course, that's the whole point of the pre-show intro is, here's what I think this is.
Okay.
And I don't really know. I know this is like a big deal of a movie, and I think this is his last movie or something like it. It's towards the end. I could be wrong about that, though. Oh, God. See, here's what's funny, because, okay, this is good. I'm going to sound really stupid here. Because his movies are all in black and white. Not all of them, but the one I've seen.
Yep.
Okay. I just assumed that he was making movies a very long time ago.
Well, yeah.
But I think, so let me spool this out for you. So, and it was a long time ago, from 2021. I think it was only like the 50s and 60s. So that's not that far before the 80s.
Right.
But I kind of forget that because I was alive for the 80s. Is any of this making sense? So I'm like, maybe it was Bergman's last movie. And then I think to myself, wait, there's not that long of a gap between when he was making movies in, say, like 1960 and releasing this movie in 1980. So I could be completely wrong about, was this like a last film or a later film? Because I have no idea when he started. I don't really know much about Ingmar Bergman, or frankly Sweden for that matter.
So this film was actually 14 years after when like Get Back was filmed.
Wait, so what year did this movie come out?
82.
Was it 82? Wow.
Yeah. And Get Back, that was filmed, what, 68, I think?
Yeah, 69.
Yeah.
We still haven't finished Get Back.
No.
We've been enjoying it, but we've been like working a lot of overtime, so we haven't had a chance to actually sit and watch more than the first episode, unfortunately. And even that we had to divide up into two parts. Mm-hmm. So yeah, this is a 3-hour movie, which I think was originally a miniseries or something on Swedish television.
It was a 4-part miniseries.
4-part.
Yeah.
So this is like whatever, the theatrical cut.
Yeah.
So I don't know what we're missing from that versus the miniseries. But also, so it's 3 hours long, and this is why we're doing it now, is because we're going to watch it. We're recording today is the day after Christmas. It's a Sunday. We both have off. We have no obligations. So this is where we're actually able to sit and watch a 3-hour movie. Because so often we'll watch these things like after work, and
we're not last minute shopping.
Right, exactly.
We're not recording songs for a epic radio show.
December was really packed.
Yeah.
And technically we're still in it, but now we're finally in like that wonderful little ebb of time where we can actually sit and watch a 3-hour film. So I don't know what this movie is about exactly. I know a little bit in that, this is all I know. I know it is set in Sweden.
Yeah.
By the way, I have a cold right now, so I sound terrible. So I apologize to the listeners. But you get to hear a very adenoidal me, even though I had my adenoids out when I was 6.
Hey, Brandon.
It It is very, yes. That one's for Rachel. Yeah, so I know this is Sweden. I think it's set in like either the late 19th century or the early 20th century, like before the First World War, I think. And I assume that, I don't know if Fanny and Alexander are brother and sister or what. I do know that they're two children.
Yeah.
And that's about all I know, because to be honest, and this sounds terrible, I don't know a lot about Sweden.
I think it's like two children in a bunch of fancy rooms.
Sounds good.
Yeah, that's from what I've seen. Looks like very fancy rooms.
Very fancy. I know it's in color, right?
Yeah.
I seem to remember the color red being a big deal. There's a lot of red, a lot of white.
Yeah.
That sounds very Christmassy.
Seems kind of soft color, like from what the shots I've seen.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So, do you know anything about this movie? Are you familiar with it?
No.
Okay.
I just know the shots I've seen looked a little like said a Kubrick film, the big long.
Barry Lyndon?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Had that kind of natural look.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited for this one because, I don't get to watch a lot of 3-hour movies.
Yeah. Oh, well, Snyder Cut.
We're not going to talk about the Snyder Cut. Dennis.
Oh, you don't want to talk about
No,
Snyder Cut?
this
That's
is-
actually 4 hours.
Oh, God.
And it's a lot of different stories divided.
No! I'm out. All right. So, look, a 3-hour movie can fly by if it's a good film, and that's what I'm hoping for here. Children, Sweden, early 20th, late 19th century. I'm sure there's a bunch of sad bits because that's the thing. I'm like, well, what could this actually be about? And I honestly have no idea. But I don't know. Maybe they die and they have to play tic-tac-toe against death. Let's find out how this is a Christmas movie, and let's just go watch the movie.
Sounds good.
All right.
When people think of Sweden, I think they have the wrong idea. Like Cliff Richard's father was just porn and gonorrhea. And Lou Reed said in the film, Blue in the Face, that compared to New York City, Sweden was a scary place. They seem to have a point after meeting with this girl. Maybe not Cliff Richards, but Lou had surely met her. The doubt in her eyes.
So we just watched a 3-hour and 9-minute movie.
Too short.
I feel shortchanged. I do. I want to see the.
We are fans of the long versions of the Lord of the Rings movies, so I guess
Oh yeah.
it's,
I could sit through the 5 and however many hours cut of Fanny and Alexander.
I'm sure we can find it somewhere.
No, you know what? If we got the Criterion, they
Okay.
have both versions apparently.
All right.
It'll be on our own time, but I want to watch the whole version, which was actually in the theaters at some point. It was commercially released in theater, but for the most part, I think overseas it was the 3-hour version. But I want to see the longer one because there are whole scenes that are cut and characters that apparently are expanded on. But for what we have, it's not hard to follow or anything. It's just that I have the feeling the longer version would be richer.
Yeah.
And this is rich already.
It really is.
This is a real mince pie of a movie. The first hour is Christmas.
Yeah, it's probably the most Christmassy thing possible.
Because I went in wondering, like, okay, so they say it's a Christmas movie. Like, how Christmassy is it? I mean, No, that first hour is just straight up a family Christmas. It almost reminds me of Joyce's story, The Dead, or using a family holiday get-together to explore ideas about psychological themes and whatnot, but using that within the Christmas holidays as sort of a setting. But this is so Christmassy. It is lush. It is gorgeously lit. And when I say lit, there are so many flames in this beginning that I was getting nervous.
Now, we have a tree, and we actually put candles on the tree this year, and we took pictures, like just briefly, like lighting the candles, taking a picture, and then blowing it out.
Yeah, because, I mean, I'm not foolish. And apparently everybody before the invention of electric light was nuts.
Yeah.
It's terrifying.
That's why they all burn to death.
Well, I mean, spoiler alert, that kind of is what happens. Not to the whole family, just to the one guy. Our first hour of the film is getting us to understand who the family is. This is very much a movie about a family.
The Ekdahl family.
The Ekdahl family. There's a matriarch, the grandmother, and she has 3 sons.
I couldn't tell. Is Oscar the oldest?
I think Oscar is the oldest.
So Oscar, Carl, Gustav?
Yeah.
And Gustav is the philanderin.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're definitely going for a Falstaffian sort of
Yeah.
figure. So Oscar is the head of a marginally successful theater company.
And his mother was an actress.
Yeah.
And I guess his father owned the company.
His father was the previous head of the theater company and owned the theater. And so passed it down then to his son. And his mother was the actress. And that's the grandmother. And his wife is Emily. And their children are Fanny and Alexander. Not a lot of Fanny in this movie, I gotta say.
No.
His first brother is Gustav Adolf, and he's a successful restaurateur and businessman. And he has his wife, Alma. That sounds right.
And he has his mistress.
He has his mistress, who also happens to be Fanny and Alexander's nanny, May. Or Maya. He has a wandering eye, but his wife is kind of okay with that because he is a person who is very kind and generous and open-handed. And when you look at everybody's choices otherwise, you can see why she's just like, look, yeah, he fools around. It's fine because he's, supporting us and he's not actually a monster or anything. It's not exactly an open marriage. I don't think there's any insinuation that she's has any affairs.
Right.
So it's not in that sense, but she's just kind of like, look, it is what it is. Things could be worse because he obviously he does adore his wife. I mean, he loves being around her. It's just that he's just got a wandering eye. He has a lot of girlfriends, and one of which happens to be this May. Which part of the setup of the first hour is him convincing her to become his mistress with the promise of he will give her the money to open her own cafe, which he does do. I mean, this isn't a guy who shirks on his promises like that. Then we have the third brother, Carl, who is some sort of, it sounds like he's a professor, and he is just a terrible guy. I mean, he's a depressed, low self-esteem alcoholic who is extremely nasty to his wife. And I don't think they have any kids.
Right.
Gustav
his
has
wife
kids.
is German, and she doesn't speak Swedish that well.
Right.
And he's like belittling her for that, belittling himself, and belittling everyone.
And he's just like nasty to everyone. He's a jerk. The one kind of somewhat humanizing moment in the movie for the cut that we saw was when he said
the fireworks.
The fireworks. Yeah, during Christmas night, he decides he's going to entertain the kids by essentially, performing fireworks, which is him farting on command and then blowing out the candles with his butt.
Yeah.
High art.
Oh, these art films. I really want to know if Carl gets something in like the longer version.
Oh, yeah.
Because in this version, so Oscar has a speech in the beginning, pretty much, and then Gustav has a speech at the end,
right?
Which is pretty fascinating. Basically saying it's a scary world out there, but we have our own little world
and live for today. And yeah. Do you wonder if Carl gets his own place?
Something, like just announcing his purpose to the world or something. I don't know. Because all he gets is he berates his wife pretty much.
Yeah.
And he farts.
Oh, God. Yeah, I would be curious to watch the longer version and see if Carl gets his own sort of something better than the one scene we get of him being morose with his wife and being cruel. Yeah. So it's set in 1907, at least as the beginning of the film is like the end of 1907. They're obviously like a very upper middle class family. Their home is very lush, and it's what you kind of would picture in your head as that late 19th century into Edwardian. If you're in Anglo countries, they would call it Edwardian or just pre-war. But like that early 20th century, a lot of velvet, a lot of house plants. Mm-hmm. Everything is very ornate. Everything is very, what we think of as Victorian, very, I don't know, how would you call it? Just, it's not cluttered, but very full.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how else to...
And the thing is, it's even more full because it's Christmas time, so every inch of the screen is just decorations, candles, candies, like
holly and evergreen and Christmas trees. There's so many Christmas trees in this house. It's so pretty. There are candles everywhere. Everything looks like it's just lit by candlelight. You had brought up in the pre-show Barry Lyndon. I don't know that they did that level of naturalistic lighting for the film, but there's a lot of lighting that feels naturalistic.
There's
right?
kind of an amazing scene where they finish a stage play, and the curtain comes down, and suddenly, like, the cast is laughing. They bring out a table of food and another Christmas tree with candles and stuff. Like, they just walk this tree in front of the screen,
Right.
and then it goes to the staff, and the cook is like the Ekdals. They want to feed the cast.
That's not just the staff. That is Gustav.
Oh, that's right.
He brought his restaurant basically into the theater. In fact, I'm not sure if like the restaurant maybe is connected to the theater physically.
Yeah.
So it seems to be implied. And he basically says, look, we're going to feed the actors. They're not our level of clientele, but don't act that way towards them.
Right.
Be as generous as you would with any of our richest patrons. Treat these people with respect. And then this is so cool. Like they have this like silver cauldron goblet thing that they've put some sort of alcohol in, and he lights it.
Even more fire.
There's so much fire in this thing. So he lights
and
it.
then it's just this parade of like all the servers and him in front with this a thing ablaze, and then like the actors and everyone is all just kind of marching around and the family
dancing around, and like there's just food everywhere. I mean, this is it's like if you could turn the Ghost of Christmas Present into like the first hour of a movie. This is what it feels like. There's family everywhere, and everybody is drinking and having fun and eating, and all the food looks gorgeous and lush, and there's decorations everywhere. It is like an absolute feast for the eyes, that first hour. And of course we spend it like, kind of getting to know this family and what they're like. And so Oscar is this very kind of, he is the head of this acting company, but he's very mild and retiring and passive even. Yeah. He's very quiet. And of course part of the reason for that is that he's having health problems.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, he is going to die about an hour into the cut that we saw. And then we get to know Gustav, and as we said, he's very ebullient, and Carl, and so but then we also get to like understand their wives and their children and the whole family and how the family works and all the dynamics. And so the first hour is basically just world setting for everything that comes later. It really emphasizes, you have to understand just how, as I keep using the word lush, that first hour is, but it's really important because of what happens.
Yeah.
And then we get to, it's, I guess, just after Christmas or still sort of Christmas time. You get the feel like there's not really a division between like all the family and everything going on. And we cut to the theater is going to do a production of Hamlet where Oscar is on stage. They're rehearsing, and I guess this is when he has like his heart attack. Yeah. This is the start of it. They're in the middle of performing the scene in Hamlet of the mousetrap, which is, if you don't remember, in Hamlet, where he wrote the play in which to, as they say, catch the conscience of the king, and to demonstrate that Hamlet's father was murdered by essentially performing the murder on stage. So they're in the middle of doing the play within the play. Yeah. Which essentially we're doing a play within a play within a play. Yeah. It's very nested, which is wonderful. Yeah. But that's when he starts to have his heart attack. He kind of loses his place on stage, and he doesn't know where he is. He's very confused, and he's obviously seriously ill. In the middle of performing the murder on stage, which is, like, again, it's all very nested. He is dying, and they rush him back to the house, and Alexander just cannot handle it because he's supposed to be about 10 years old, I think. So, of course, unfortunately, the father dies, and it being, the early 20th century, mom's got to get remarried, or at least that's how she feels. I don't think the family thinks she needs to get remarried. I think the grandmother would have been like, just live with us for as long as you need, but she feels the family needs they need a father. And I think also she just fell for the bishop who buried the Oscar, right? And so she fell in love with him. He is a widower, and she says, well, he's a bishop. He's, highly placed. This is going to be good for the kids. And he is very kind to her when we first see him courting her.
Do we see him courting her?
Well, that's the thing. I think in the longer cut, we probably see a lot more of it. We just get intimations here.
In this version, we're kind of introduced to him admonishing Alexander, and then immediately they're getting married.
Well, we do see that he is the one who performed the funeral service. He's talking to her at the funeral.
Right.
I just assumed that, okay, they must have developed some sort of relationship following the death, and she just, went for it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's just decide this is probably the best thing that I should do for the family. But we don't find out about the courtship until it cuts to summertime. And it's definitely summertime because the sun never sets. That's actually kind of an interesting thing watching this film, is all of the scenes at Christmas time are, of course, dark. Just there's like one or two moments where the sun is out, but most of it is set in the dark. Just because, it's Sweden. Yeah. it's December. It's going to be dark. And it's obviously in the next phase of the film, summertime, they're talking about, it's so laid out, and of course the sun is very bright. So yeah, think midsummer. Yeah. But I liked it the way that the film just takes it as given.
You know what? When the mother was crying over Oscar, that was very midsummer like.
Oh my God, her wailing.
Yeah, it's horrifying.
Yeah.
To see, but
yeah, it was very hard to watch. As somebody who has been in Alexander's position. Mm-hmm. Watching your mom be that upset, on the one hand, how could they not be? Yeah. On the other hand, it's very upsetting for you as the child because you're watching people who are usually always in control, like lose control in their grief, and it's a really unnerving experience when you're a kid. Yeah. This film had some heavy resonances for me, at least in the part where his father is dying because it's happening at Christmas time. Mm-hmm. So I was like, this is feeling really familiar. If you remember our episode on My Neighbor Totoro, I went through something similar. But thankfully, the rest of my life did not go the same route as this movie. Holy mackerel.
You dodged a bullet.
Boy, did I ever. Because here's the thing. His stepfather is a monster, and my stepfather was fantastic.
Yeah. Now, Edvard, the bishop.
Yes.
He was supposed to be played by Max von Sydow.
Which would have been
even more intense.
Yeah, even scarier.
And I was just thinking, now what would make it even scarier? And I was thinking, what if Klaus Kinski played?
God. No.
We'd be scarred for life if we had seen that movie.
Now you're making a break into some really frightening territory.
But I'm trying to convey just how scary this guy is.
No, by having but see, that's actually why I kind of like the casting. So the guy that he cast is apparently in Sweden. He's like a song and dance man. Mm-hmm. And so there are times where you can see where he can turn on a certain amount of charm. Yeah. And that's where your footing is a little off for part of the film. When he says, we want to get married, he makes this demand of her that I want you to bring nothing to this marriage. No toys, no clothes, no possessions. You're coming in. She jokes that am I coming naked? And he's essentially saying more or less, not physically naked, but you're going to have nothing. And on the one hand, when you get to his house, you realize, that he lives a level of austerity that people, for the most part, don't do. It's an extreme contrast to the Ekdal house in Uppsala, and also the grandmom's summer house that we also get to see. This is the exact opposite. This is there are no paintings on the walls. There's barely any furniture. It's extremely stark. He also lives with his family, much like the Ekdals all lived near each other, but his is his mother and his sister and his aunt, and they're all terrifying people. Just again, very austere and cruel, or damaged in some way.
Also, going on at the same time, Alexander is seeing his father as a ghost.
Oh yeah,
dressed all in white.
Yes,
and the evil family is all dressed in black, so it's
that's a good point.
Very striking.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that fact. Part of the thing with this movie is it never draws a line between what's real and what's fantasy and what might be magical. Anything could possibly be real in this.
Mm-hmm. And it's so subtle how it does it. It's not like doesn't really hit you on the head. Like,
Right.
There's no music swell to whenever.
Right. There's never a tell
Yeah.
to say, okay, this part's not real, except that this is not a thing that you or I would have ever experienced.
Right.
So the first time we get a hint of that is when Alexander's just kind of hanging out by himself in the beginning of the film, and we see like one of the statues in his grandmother's house move a little. And that's your first inkling, like, oh, this is curious. And like, how much of this is just that Alexander has an active imagination? And there is an emphasis on his imagination being very active, but it's definitely not just him, which I find interesting because, again, there's a whole other subplot where there is a Jewish family who Alexander's grandmother is best friends with Isaac Jacoby, who is he's a moneylender, but his nephew is also into puppetry,
Right.
and does like puppet shows and magic shows, and they're not just doing stage magic and puppet shows, but you get the sense that they are actual magicians,
Right.
like they're doing like actual ceremonial magic and things like that. Not that we actually see that kind of thing, like we don't see ceremonies or anything like that, but there is later in the film actual magic being worked. And it's also interesting, just jumping back again, Grandma's best friend / sometimes boyfriend is Jewish, and he goes in and out of the house, and there's nothing strange about that with them. Whereas the bishop, of course, is like deeply anti-Semitic and hates this guy and all the rest of it. But
needs money.
But he needs money.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing that we'll get to. So they move into the house, and it's very austere, and he beats the kids because he just doesn't like how they are. Alexander, there are times where he tells fibs because he's 10 and that's what kids do, but there are times where he just makes things up. He is imaginative, whatever. Whereas, you get the sense that the Ekdal family sees this as harmless. The bishop just beats him. And even when Alexander is convinced before any beating to confess that, like, okay, I made things up, and after he's threatened with all sorts of corporal punishment, including I could beat you, I could feed you castor oil, or I could shove you into this dank cubby hole for an hour and let the rats gnaw at you, Alexander will eventually confesses, like, yeah, okay, I made things up, whatever, I'm sorry. And that's not good enough. The bishop still is going to beat him.
Yeah.
It's like that kind of a household. It reminded me a lot of Dickens. And so, of course, Mom knows that this is horrible. Like, Mom sees what's going on, and I think there's a lot more of it in the longer cut. In fact, I know that there's a scene that's been cut where Oscar's two surviving brothers, Gustav and Karl, go to the bishop and try to convince him to give Emily a divorce.
I wonder if the longer cut makes Karl a little more sympathetic.
God, I hope so.
Because in this version, it's like we just see him being a jerk, and that's it. Pretty much.
Yeah, I'd be really curious to see if they make more of his character in the long version. Eventually, the family conspires to save the kids because she's trying to get divorced. She can't get divorced. He refuses, and he has it bound up pretty tight that if you leave me, I keep the kids. If you try to divorce me, I get the kids. There's nothing you can do. So they go to Isaac. They come up with a plan for how he can get the kids out of the house by... He's going to go to the bishop and say, I'll buy this, big, heavy chest, and this is how I'm going to lend you the money. You have this chest that you don't want, I'm going to buy it. And so they're doing it on that level. Of course, what he's going to do is he's going to hide the kids in the chest and take them out of the house. But of course, the bishop kind of cottons on that this is what is going on. As they're trying to get the chest out of the house, he confronts Isaac and he essentially says, who do you, do you think I'm stupid? And
he starts to punch him and...
he starts physically like beating him and yelling like, slurs and whatnot. This is where the magic part kind of kicks back in, like actual magic, because Isaac just screams.
Yeah,
he gives
this light comes on him.
This blinding light flashes. The bishop has run upstairs to the nursery to show that the kids aren't there, and there are two little kids laying on the floor.
Yeah.
So obviously some sort of magic has transpired so that the bishop sees the kids as Isaac and his, workers lift the chest out of the room and get out of the house. One of the guys, by the way, one of the people hauling the chest is Peter Stormare.
Last scene shoving Steve Buscemi into a wood chipper.
The rest of the film is the kids are hiding at Isaac's house, and this is where we meet Isaac's own family, which is like his nephews and whatnot who live there. And it's all very strange, and there are parts of it that are odd and mystical, but there's also like an threatening undercurrent where at any moment you kind of feel like any of the younger people, not Isaac himself, he seems perfectly fine, but he has 2 nephews living with him, Aaron, who we meet, and he's the puppeteer guy, and also Ismail, who is always locked away, but who you apparently can hear singing. And there's something very kind of weird about Aaron. And there are times where you just think like he gets a little too close to the kid.
Yeah.
Where you're kind of like, is he going to molest him?
Yeah.
And he doesn't. But then he brings him to Ismail. And that is a very strange scene.
Yeah.
Ismail is locked in a room which is behind a door, and then behind the door is like, a cage, and it's they're very locked away. Ismail is played by a woman, but supposed to be a guy.
But anybody could mistake that.
Well, because Dennis,
I didn't know. I just thought like it looked like, like we'd just seen Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, and there's all kinds of androgynous looking people there, and this.
You're just primed for androgynous people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I totally understand. And of course, because the character has a male name and is supposed to be male, but it's being, so it's a very androgynous figure, but there's something very threatening and borderline. The whole conversation is like creepy in that, he's talking about how we are the same person, and like I'm living through you and you live through me, and all this, like it's very unnerving, and you're just waiting for the moment where they are physically going to cross the line into molestation. We never see anything happen, but what he does is actually worse, because he essentially psychically goes through Alexander's mind and sees what's going on with the bishop. Fanny and Alexander will never be free unless the bishop is dead. Yeah. And so he, through Alexander's mind, is able to essentially let one of the older relatives in the house set themselves on fire, which sets the house on fire and sets the bishop on fire. Meanwhile, the bishop has been drugged by the mom. The mom went back to the house. She had gone back there and decided that she was just going to drug him with a whole bunch of sleeping pills and run out. Like, she wasn't going to kill him or anything, but she just wanted to drug him enough that she could get away. Yeah. So he is knocked out when the house is set on fire. But he apparently does wake up. We later learn from a inspector that, he definitely had all the sleeping potion in his system, but he had woken up in the meantime. It just made it a little harder for him. So essentially, she's not really at fault. This relative who set themselves on fire is at fault. But the relative was set on fire through psychic manipulations of Ismail through Alexander. So this is where, again, it's this idea that like magic is real, or because we're seeing this all through Alexander, is it real, or is this Alexander's imagination? Is it his own feelings of guilt? Again, he sees ghosts. He sees his father. He sees things that to you and I that shouldn't be there. So there's a lot of questions as to what's real and what's not real.
I read one interpretation that he saw his father's ghost as not active enough, and so he summoned like a scarier spirit or something.
And that's Ismail?
Yeah.
Oh, I like that interpretation.
Because before this happens, like he sees his father's, he's lost in Isaac's house.
Yeah,
and he's in this puppet room, and suddenly there's his dad just kind of sitting there, and he just puts his hand on him and stuff. And
it's interesting that it's in a puppet room. To what extent are these ghosts puppets for Alexander? So, the bishop dies and mom is free. The family then goes back together. The kids and Emily can go back and living with grandma.
Emily, by the way, also was pregnant with the bishop's.
And that's part of why she initially wasn't going to leave, is because she's pregnant. What are they going to do with, my child and everything? So this solves a lot of problems for them. Yeah. Meanwhile, of course, Gustav's mistress, May, has also gotten pregnant. And so they give birth at the same time, essentially. So the end of the film is the whole family, an extended family, and everyone is back together at what I guess is supposed to be like a christening party for the 2 babies. And, the one baby now doesn't have a dad. And the other baby it's in flux because Gustav wants, everybody around him all the time. And May and actually Gustav's daughter both want to go off to Stockholm and open a shop, and just don't want to really have anything to do with Gustav because he's very controlling. Not in like a bad way. It's not like the bishop, but he's just a bit smothery.
Yeah.
And I can see why, like, especially if you're a young woman, it's just like, okay, like, yeah, but this is a bit much, dude.
The male authority figures in this movie all don't know what they're doing.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And interesting, like the three brothers are named after three Swedish kings.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's a comment on that somehow.
Sweden still has a monarchy, believe it or not. Yeah, all those Scandinavian countries still have monarchs, I guess, except for Iceland, because they never had their own. They never had a monarch when they were an independent or quasi-independent state. So yeah, that's the end of the film. Is the family is kind of back together, but it's a bit in flux because, is May going to go off with the oldest, Gustav's oldest daughter, to start a shop? Probably, we don't really know.
But there's a fascinating scene where Alexander is wandering the halls and then he gets pushed over by the ghost of the bishop.
Yeah,
who says, "You'll never be free of me."
Right, so he has a new ghost in his life.
Yeah.
The end of the film is Emily goes to the grandmother and says, now that I'm back, Oscar did want me to take over the theater. I think I really do want to do that. And she's like, yeah, obviously, Gustav's been running it, but his heart's not really in it. He's not an artist. He's a successful businessman, but he's not an artist. So yeah, please take over the theater again. And she wants to put on Strindberg. So the end of the film is the grandmother reading through the script for a dream play, and it has the opening lines. Everything can happen. Everything is possible and probable. Time and space do not exist. On a flimsy framework of reality, the imagination spins, weaving new patterns. And as she's reading that, Alexander is falling asleep in her lap. And it's a very sweet ending, but it's also ambiguous, which is fitting. As I said, I want to see the full-length version. Obviously, at 3 hours, it's not truncated, but I feel like the long version has probably even more character development. And
maybe Fanny's in it.
Oh, I know. Fanny is, it's a shame because the couple of times where she actually gets to do anything, she gives some pretty good, like, severe looks at people, but she has very few lines.
and Alexander is supposed to be Ingmar Bergman, or like
to some extent, yeah.
It's partly autobiographical.
And
then I
then
guess his father was kind of like the stepfather.
Yeah.
And maybe he was working some stuff out there.
Oh, you think?
But
so yeah, it's a gorgeously filmed and performed movie, but also, like, thematically, I found it really interesting. I think it's, as I was watching it, it reminded me a lot of Dickens, especially like David Copperfield, and I later saw on IMDb that he did say he was thinking about Dickens when he was writing it. And you can feel that the whole. My early childhood is very, very happy, and then mom gets remarried, and this guy is a monster. Yeah. That is that is a lot of Charles Dickens right there.
One thing, it made me think a lot about Christmas.
Yeah.
Like, where Christmas is like, it's this holiday, it's this, partially pagan holiday at this time of the year where you can't do anything useful because you can't plow the fields or anything like that. And so it's kind of like this holiday where you just give in to excess, but also like, useless arts are suddenly king,
okay.
Plays and art and music is all suddenly, they rule the world.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's the whole first part of this movie is just kind of wallowing in that, like there's bored sex, there's, drinking, there's eating, there's, imagination and weirdness. And then it ends, and then it's the cold, harsh reality of Christianity.
Yeah. Oh, that's true. Yeah. But actually that's interesting you say that, because then when is the whole section of life with the bishop set, but in the summertime, but it's a very austere summer of the sun is never setting. So that it's just unrelenting light.
Yeah.
It's just, you're constantly being watched because you're constantly being illuminated.
Yeah.
Sucks. Well, it's overwhelming, and it's austere, and it's horrible.
It's fascinating. So each time they have like this kind of establishing shot of this church where they're living, like it starts with this swirling pool.
Yeah.
And then it pans up to the actual church and stuff, and it just seems like this kind of fortress castle thing.
Very much so.
And there's this whole backstory where the bishop's previous wife had drowned with her daughters or something
Yeah.
in there.
And it is it sounds like it's probably an accident, at least in the
Yeah.
cut that we saw. Alexander creates this story where he actually killed them and drowned them in the river, but that's not what happened. They literally just fell. That's
Yeah.
all. So I found this just like a fascinating film. I feel like it's something I want to watch again.
Mm-hmm.
Like, granted, that's going to take scheduling time because it's very long. And actually, what I want to do
We
is
still have 8 hours of Beatles to watch.
I know. But, this is the kind of thing that, if you have a nice long winter break with the holidays, this is the kind of thing you want to dig into and watch. This is, this feels made for Christmas television.
Yeah, before you finish this podcast, go quick watch it and then come back. And we'll wrap it up for you.
But seriously, I'm thinking about, like, am I in that criterion with the 5-hour cut that has both editions? So I don't know. I'm thinking about that.
Yeah.
It's interesting because while that whole middle section is so hard to watch because it's just cruelty.
Yeah.
There's something so cozy in the beginning and the end. Like, that sounds weird saying cozy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it is. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm just a sucker for upper middle class luxuries.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. What do you mean? Yeah.
You are a fan of what's that show? Downton Abbey.
Hey, it's very pretty. It's a dumb show. It is, but it's pretty. Okay? What is that? Oh, another thing about just the second half of the film just being summertime. I like when we leave the austerity of the bishop's house and go to the grandmother's summer home. Just because it is, yes, it's summertime, so it's all very bright, but here it's all green.
Yeah.
Like, there's just greenery everywhere. It's like in the house, outside the house. There's gardens. It's a big, airy place with lots of light. It's really beautiful, and you just get the sense of these are people who live.
Yeah.
They are very earthy. They are very. I hesitate to use the word pagan because it's very loaded, but they're very. I don't know. They're very much more connected to earthy things. So, what do you think is more Christmassy? This movie.
Or Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence? This movie.
No, I was going to say, what do you think is more Christmassy? This movie.
Or Dolly Parton?
Well, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
Let me finish. What do you think is more Christmassy? This movie or Swedish Chef trying to cook and eat Big Bird in a Muppet Family Christmas?
It's the same thing. They're the same picture.
So
It's kind of the same movie as Smoky Mountain Christmas, though, really. Same themes. There's ghosts. Are there ghosts? There's jailbreak, sort of.
well, they do get the kids out of, like, their own confinement.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if
It all works out at the end.
Yeah,
probably.
sure. I guess if, there's relationships. Now, wait a minute. Are you really? Actually, you could probably find a connection. Anyway, no, we're not. Well, this is one of the darker Christmas movies I've ever seen.
Darker than Gremlins?
A different type of dark. Gremlins is funny. I mean, this actually has some funny parts too, but and yet it's still
Now, you are a huge It's a Wonderful Life fan, so you're used to dark Christmas movies.
Well, exactly. Yes. No. This fits perfectly well into that genre, if that's even a genre. But, well, I mean, in a way it is, actually. Because if you think about it, aside from the nativity, the most famous Christmas stories are kind of ghost stories.
Yep.
A Christmas Carol has 4 ghosts.
What were you just watching today?
Oh,
70s?
That's right. It was some 70s British dramatization of some what is his name? M.R. James stories. So M.R. James was a writer back in the early 20th century. But anyway, he wrote a lot of ghost stories that are set around Christmas time. It's all kind of like late Gothic literature. Telling ghost stories was something that is part of like Christmas. I mean, I think that it's even like a line in the most wonderful time of the year. You know, there'll be scary ghost stories and tales of old glories of Christmases a long time ago. Because that's the thing, people used to sit up and tell ghost stories at Christmas time. Just like we do at Halloween, but ghost stories are actually a whole part of Christmas in a way. You know, It's a Wonderful Life kind of falls into that. It's not a ghost story. It's more like almost a science fiction in a way, because it's like, here's an alternate universe where you didn't exist. So what's interesting is this movie kind of fits into that mold because it is also a ghost story. Alexander sees the ghost of his father. At the end, you know, we said he sees the ghost of his stepfather. Yeah. You know, he's haunted. You know, this is a movie that plays with themes from Hamlet a lot and specifically brings up Hamlet. But even Hamlet actually opens. Oh my God, that's the thing. Hamlet opens up with the appearance of the ghost, right? Hamlet's father. Mm-hmm. But the opening lines is something to the effect of, hold on a second. Let me see if I can dig up the... Okay, that's right. It's from the beginning of Hamlet, and after the ghost fades with the rising of the sun. And Marcellus says, some say that ever against that season comes wherein our Saviour's birth is celebrated, Christmas. This bird of dawning night singeth all night long, and then, they say, no spirit dare stir abroad. The nights are wholesome, then no planets strike, no fairy takes, nor witch hath power to charm, so hallowed and gracious is that time. Christmas morning is supposed to break the spell of ghosts, specifically the dawning. Everything up until the moment is haunted. So I just find it interesting that this movie, like, it plays with Christmas as a haunted time because it's dark and you're surrounded by family. There's always this sense of the past because the year is at the end. Combining that, you know, like, it has the allusions to Hamlet and the father dying, and I don't know, like, it's interesting how it is very much a Christmas movie, but, you know, so often these days when people think a movie about Christmas, they think something, you know, Home Alone or Christmas Vacation, which are both fun movies. You know, I mean, it's fun, kind of lowbrow humor, but there's another type of Christmas that is spookier and more in touch with something deeper. And A Christmas Carol gets to that, and It's a Wonderful Life gets to that, and Fanny and Alexander gets to that.
For toasting and caroling out in the snow, there'll be scary ghost stories and tales of the glories of Christmases long, long ago. It's the most wonderful.
So that was Fanny and Alexander, written and directed by Ingmar Bergman from 1982, 83. It depends which version you're seeing. Highly recommended. You can follow us on social media. We are Merry VS Movies on Twitter, and you can write to us. We are merryvsmovies@gmail.com. Please contact us with any comments, questions, complaints, or suggestions. We always want to hear from you. We are available on Apple Music, I guess it's called, or Apple Podcasts. I don't know. Just, God, go back to calling it iTunes. At least I know what that was. Yes, I'm an old woman now. So yeah, we're on Apple Podcasts where you can rate and review us, which would be nice. And we are available on Stitcher, Spotify, Overcast, pretty much anywhere that podcasts are available. You can get our RSS feed from our Anchor website and plug it into whatever your podcatcher of choice is. I have not picked next week's movie yet because it's going to be January and we are done with theme months, except I'm kind of tempted to... I was thinking about, like, British movies that I've not seen from the 80s.
Okay.
Basically what this comes down to is I really want to see a movie called The Long Good Friday, but, you know,
sure.
We'll see. So, yeah, we have not picked next week's movie, so I have nothing to announce just yet. But, yeah, we'll figure that out soon. You'll know what the movie is when I know what the movie is.
Yeah.
But, so until next time...
Numbskull.
Oh my God! It's the same word in English and in Swedish!
Yay.
That blew my mind!